I'm the mother of Shannon Schieber. My beautiful daughter was murdered in Center City, Philadelphia in 1998 by a person known as the Center City Rapist. I live with the pain and the heartbreak of her absence every single day. And my family and I were forced to deal with an incredible justice system in this state. And it's something you could never imagine, nor could you wish it on anyone. My family's experience compels me to speak out, and I work full-time here in the state to try very hard to eliminate the death penalty. I'm here today, however, to support a study commission to help the state legislatures and provide them an opportunity to learn more about the victim's point of view in this whole death penalty system.
It was the early hours of May 7th, 1998, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The city slept under a damp spring sky, its streets glistening faintly from a light drizzle earlier that night. Inside the apartment building at 251 South 23rd Street, most residents were in bed, the hum of the city reduced to a distant murmur. But at 2:03 a.m., that uneasy calm shattered. From the second-floor apartment, a voice broke through the quiet, urgent, terrified, desperate. "Help me!" It was a woman's voice, raw with panic. The sound carried into the hallway, piercing enough to wake a neighbor. That neighbor recognized it instantly. It was Shannon Schieber, the young woman who lived across the halls. In that moment, the neighbor faced a decision most of us hope we never will. What do you do when someone screams for their life just feet away from you? He did what he could, ran to her door, pounding hard, shouting that he would call 911, and he did. The call was logged as a Priority 1, the highest classification for someone in immediate danger. As he spoke to the operator, he added a chilling detail. He could hear a choking sound. Something inside that apartment was horribly wrong. Panicked, the neighbor sprinted downstairs to alert the couple living beneath Shannon, hoping that together they could break down the door. But the woman in that apartment said her fiancé was away for work. She couldn't help force entry. Time was slipping away, second by second. When police arrived 7 minutes later, the downstairs neighbor led them upstairs. But now, silence. No more screams, no more choking sounds. The officers suggested maybe no one was inside. That's a moment that still haunts this case, because the neighbor across the hall was adamant. He knew Shannon's voice. He knew he had heard a struggle, and the woman beneath Shannon's apartment confirmed she had heard it too. The police floated another theory. Maybe the sound had come from the street. One officer shone his flashlight toward Shannon's balcony. Curtains drawn, door shut, no movement. And with that, they made a fateful choice. They didn't force entry. Instead, they told the neighbors to call 911 again if they heard anything else. Within 5 minutes, the officers were gone. From a purely procedural standpoint, the police acted within their policies at the time. But from a human perspective, it's impossible not to ask, how much harm can be avoided if we lean toward action rather than hesitation? Because in cases like this, every minute can be the difference between life and death. The next day, May 7th, was supposed to be routine for Shannon. She had been studying hard the night before for her final finance exam, the last hurdle before summer break in her first year of the prestigious Wharton doctoral program. The plan was simple: meet with a study group at 9:03 a.m., have lunch with her brother Sean, take the exam, and then head home to Maryland to see her parents. But by lunchtime, Sean was worried. Friends from Shannon's study group said she never showed up, and none of them could reach her. He drove to her apartment and noticed something odd. While the balcony curtains were drawn, the balcony door itself stood open. He rang her bell. No answer. Alarm rising, Sean went to a friend's house nearby, Samantha, to call their mother, Vicky. Her instruction was immediate. Go back. Find someone to let you in. Sean and Samantha returned and began ringing doorbells in the building until someone finally answered, the same neighbor who had called police the night before. When Sean explained that no one had heard from Shannon, the neighbor's face went pale. He told Sean about the screams and the choking sound from just hours earlier. This time, there was no waiting for the police. Sean and Samantha went straight to Shannon's door and broke it down. What they found inside was every family's nightmare. Shannon Schieber, just 23 years old, lay naked, face down on her bed. She had been raped and murdered. From a storyteller's lens, this is the moment when the narrative fractures, where an ordinary young woman's promising life becomes the center of a crime that will expose deep cracks in law enforcement culture and investigative priorities. From a human perspective, it's where rage mixes with grief, because what makes this story so devastating isn't just the brutality of the crime, but the lingering possibility, the awful what if, that it might have been prevented. And in the hours and days to come, the world would learn just how much more there was to this tragedy. To truly understand the loss, you have to know who Shannon Schieber was. She wasn't just a promising student. She was the kind of person who, from the very start, seemed destined for extraordinary things. By 18 months old, Shannon could recite the alphabet backwards. At age 3, she was reading at a level most second graders struggled to reach. She wasn't just gifted, she was curious in a way that made the world feel like an endless puzzle to solve. Teachers quickly realized that her intelligence was matched by drive. She didn't just want to learn, she wanted to excel, and she wanted to lead. In high school, she served as student government president, even speaking before the city council in support of education funding. There's a photograph of her from that time, poised, confident, speaking into a microphone with the clarity of someone who knows her words matter. In November 1992, she and her friend Stephanie were the only students to testify at a public hearing on the city's energy tax. The moment was more than symbolic. It showed a teenager stepping into civic responsibility long before most of her peers. That drive carried her to Duke University, where she was elected president of her freshman class and became co-captain of the equestrian team. It wasn't just her mind that impressed. It was her discipline. Balancing triple majors in economics, philosophy, and mathematics wasn't enough. She excelled in all three. After graduation, Shannon earned a full scholarship to the prestigious Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Her goal wasn't the stereotypical Wall Street climb. She wanted a career in finance to help those in need, particularly marginalized communities. That's important to note. In a field often associated with self-interest, Shannon saw it as a tool for service. And she wasn't naive about safety. When she and her father searched for housing in Philadelphia, they specifically asked for a safe neighborhood. They were directed to Center City, a place considered secure, especially for graduate students. No one knew at the time that a predator was already stalking that very area. Just days before her death, Shannon experienced something that now reads like a warning she could not have fully understood. She was walking through Rittenhouse Square when she realized a man was following her. Each time she circled the park, he was still there. She looped around several times, trying to lose him, making sure he wouldn't learn where she lived. On its own, this would have been unsettling enough, but the truth was far darker. A serial rapist was already operating in Center City, and his method was chillingly consistent. The victims were always young women, often college students. The attacker would break into their apartments, sometimes through a window, sometimes via a balcony, and assault them, often while they slept. His approach suggested planning, agility, and an almost predator-like familiarity with the neighborhood. Between June and August 1997, at least 4 such attacks occurred, each with disturbing similarities. One victim awoke to find herself stripped naked, her hair wet, bruises encircling her neck. Another described the attacker climbing in, covering her face with a pillowcase, tightening a belt around her neck, then raping her before fleeing. Evidence, DNA, hair, bodily fluids, was collected in several of these cases. But here's where analysis reveals one of the most damning elements of the story. The evidence was scattered across 2 incompatible computer systems, delaying any connection between the crimes. And it wasn't just a tech failure, it was a cultural one. Many sexual assault reports were filed under non-criminal classification codes, effectively burying them. Some detectives reportedly dismissed victims outright, with one even calling the sex crimes unit the lying unit, implying that women fabricated rape claims half the time. When you read this, you can't help but wonder if those earlier cases had been investigated with urgency, would Shannon still be alive? On the night of May 6th, Shannon had been studying for hours. She drew herself a bath, placing a paper nearby, a small comfort ritual after days of intense preparation. Her second-floor apartment had a small balcony. The building's management had even coiled barbed wire around a nearby tree to discourage intruders from climbing up. It wasn't enough. The attacker scaled the narrow 3-foot gap between Shannon's building and the one next door, swinging onto her balcony. The screen door was locked, but the balcony door itself was open, a choice made to fight the humidity of a Philadelphia spring. Inside, Shannon fought. Books were knocked from her bedside. She drew blood from her attacker, traces later found on the wall, the bed, the balcony. But in the end, the fight cost her everything. And, perhaps most infuriatingly, as we now know, the police had been just outside her door within minutes of the attack. The moment Shannon Schieber saw his sister lying motionless on that bed, the world tilted. The vibrant, determined young woman he had grown up with was gone, stolen in the most violent way imaginable. Beside him, his friend Samantha froze, then pulled herself together enough to call their mother, Vicky. When Vicky picked up, she heard the kind of words no parent can ever prepare for. She called her husband, Sylvester, telling him to get to Philadelphia immediately. That night, grief would drive them into a city that felt suddenly alien, cold, hostile, and full of flashing blue lights. When they arrived at Shannon's building around 7 o'clock p.m., the street was clogged with police vehicles and news crews. The media, aggressive, hungry for a headline, shouted questions at the devastated couple as they pushed their way inside. It's an image that still raises questions about empathy in journalism. How many times do we need to see a family's first moments of grief broadcast before we understand that some moments aren't ours to take? Inside, 2 detectives from the Philadelphia Police Department's homicide unit began questioning Vicky and Sylvester separately. They wanted to know everything: Shannon's habits, her friends, anyone who might wish her harm. The Schiebers answered through shock, still not fully absorbing the reality. Then came the next cruel blow. Shannon's body needed to be formally identified the following day, but not until 9 o'clock a.m., when the promised pickup time came and went. They waited and waited. It was 1:30 p.m. before they were taken to the morgue. That delay pushed the autopsy until 5 o'clock p.m. And because it was now the weekend, the coroner's office was closed. The family was told they couldn't have her body until Monday. This was not just inefficiency, it was bureaucracy compounding grief. Only after persistent calls to various officials were Vicky and Sylvester able to get Shannon's body released on Saturday morning to begin funeral preparations. In those first days, police issued flyers to pawn shops, hoping to locate Shannon's stolen Canon camera. Other items missing from her apartment included a pen, jewelry, a backpack, and hundreds of CDs. For a brief moment, there was hope. Maybe the stolen goods would lead them to the killer. But the reality, early suspicion fell on a fellow Wharton student. DNA testing quickly cleared him. From there, the investigation lost momentum. The initial theory from police was that Shannon's murder was a crime of passion, possibly by an ex-lover. That assumption is worth analyzing, because it reveals something telling. Investigators leaned toward a personal motive without seriously weighing the possibility of a serial offender. That framing influenced their early questions, their suspect lists, and their urgency, or lack thereof, in linking her case to other unsolved assaults. By autumn, Shannon's case had been featured 3 times on America's Most Wanted. The exposure was intended to shake loose new leads, but the most explosive tip didn't go to the police. It went to the Philadelphia Inquirer. An anonymous caller told the paper that police had ignored 2 similar home invasion sexual assaults. In both cases, the victim survived, but the attacks bore striking resemblance to Shannon's murder. The source suggested that had police recognized the pattern earlier, the rapist might have been caught before he escalated to murder. The Enquirer's reporters dug in, and what they found was damning. The investigation uncovered a disturbing reality. Within the Philadelphia Police Department, many rape cases were being misclassified as non-criminal under a code called 2701. This wasn't a few clerical errors, it was systemic. Between 1993 and 1998, hundreds of sexual assaults were essentially buried by paperwork. The journalists found that some officers referred to the sex crimes unit as the lying expletive unit, claiming that half of all rape allegations were fabricated. These attitudes weren't whispered in locker rooms. They were openly expressed, shaping how cases were handled, or more often, not handled. Here's where the analysis is unavoidable. A system that treats victims as liars by default is a system designed to fail them. When you begin from disbelief, you miss patterns, you dismiss evidence, and you leave dangerous people free to harm again. It took 17 months for police to link 5 rapes in the same area, despite identical methods and DNA evidence at every scene. In at least 2 cases, DNA wasn't tested until after the Enquirer's report made headlines. The scale of the problem was staggering. When every 2701 coded file from the past 5 years was reviewed, 863 cases were reclassified as other sexual offenses, and 681 cases were reclassified as rape. Vicky and Sylvester couldn't help but see the bigger picture. Had these earlier rapes been properly investigated, Shannon's killer might have already been behind bars before that night in May 1998. And perhaps most haunting, 2 nights before she was murdered, Shannon had been followed through Rittenhouse Square. If she had known a serial rapist was active in her neighborhood, she might have gone to the police. She might have taken different precautions. But that knowledge had been buried in reports no one acted on. Even before Shannon's murder, whispers had been circulating within certain circles of law enforcement. Someone was stalking the women of Center City. The attacks were precise, calculated, and disturbingly similar in execution, but the connection between these crimes was never officially acknowledged until it was too late. By the time Shannon's case became part of the pattern, the damage was irreversible. 5 women had already been attacked in their own homes. The FBI was eventually brought in, their behavioral profilers sketching out a picture of the man they called the Center City Rapist. They believed he was extremely familiar with the neighborhood, likely lived or worked nearby, fit, agile, and confident in moving through tight urban spaces. He seemed to possess the patience of a predator who had studied his prey in advance. This wasn't random. It was targeted hunting. For months after Shannon's murder, the rapist went silent, or so it seemed. In reality, he had simply moved hundreds of miles away. In May 2001, in Fort Collins, Colorado, a woman awoke to find a man in her bedroom. He tied her up, covered her eyes, and sexually assaulted her before fleeing. 2 weeks later, another woman on the same street endured a similar attack. Here's where investigative diligence made the difference. One nurse conducting a forensic exam collected a meticulous swab from an area the attacker had licked. That single piece of evidence contained his DNA. The DNA was run through national databases. It matched the samples from Shannon's apartment in Philadelphia. This was the turning point, the bridge that connected crimes in 2 different states, proving they were the work of the same man. Investigators in Philadelphia and Colorado began pooling resources, comparing suspect lists, and narrowing their search. Detectives reviewed records of men who had made financial transactions in both cities during the relevant timeframes. They cross-referenced ages, addresses, and known movements. From hundreds, the suspect pool shrank to 83 names. 2 tips would blow the case open. One came from a woman who said she had dated a man resembling the composite sketch. His name, Troy Graves. Another came from a neighbor who thought the rapist's getaway car looked a lot like her neighbor's, also named Troy Graves. Graves was a U.S. Air Force senior airman stationed in Wyoming, but living in Fort Collins. His past? Disturbing. While in Philadelphia, he had lived within walking distance of several crime scenes. He had been stopped by police in January 1999 for questioning, but was released. And during his Air Force service, he'd been reprimanded for attempting to enter a female officer's dorm room. An ex-girlfriend reported that he would disappear on long late-night walks, sometimes returning with scratches or bruises he couldn't convincingly explain. In April 2002, detectives approached Graves's home. He wasn't there, so they left a business card. His wife called them back saying Troy was at work but had a dental appointment later that day. When contacted, Graves agreed to speak with detectives. During questioning, he grew uneasy when asked to provide fingerprints and DNA. Initially, he hesitated, saying he wanted to talk to his wife first. That hesitation was enough for officers to detain him. Fingerprint comparison was immediate. They matched prints found on a victim's balcony in Colorado. DNA testing confirmed the match to Shannon's murder scene in Philadelphia. On April 23, 2002, 29-year-old Troy Graves was arrested and charged in connection with multiple sexual assaults in Colorado. 3 days later, Philadelphia charged him with 50 counts, including rape, aggravated assault, burglary, and first-degree murder. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Graves struck a deal. If prosecutors took the death penalty off the table, he would plead guilty to Shannon's murder and the other assaults. His confession was chilling. He described climbing onto Shannon's balcony, catching her in the bathroom, and attacking her. She fought, biting his finger, scratching his face, but he overpowered her by putting his arms around her neck. At one point, he thought he might have broken it. He admitted hearing someone knock at her door twice during the attack, but claimed he didn't hear the police. Whether that's true or self-serving, we can't know. The Schiebers believe it's likely he was still inside when officers arrived, and that he slipped out only after they left. In Pennsylvania, first-degree murder often comes with the possibility of execution. Many assumed Shannon's parents would push for it. They didn't. Rooted in their Catholic faith, Vicky and Sylvester Schieber opposed capital punishment. They were vocal, public, and unwavering, even under intense pressure from prosecutors, media, and members of the public who equated the death penalty with justice. For them, the principle was non-negotiable. Life is sacred. Taking another life, even that of their daughter's killer, would not bring Shannon back. Vicky put it plainly. If you have a set of principles and don't live by them when you're tested, were they ever your principles to begin with? Their stance drew both admiration and criticism. A local talk radio host published an open letter arguing Graves should be executed. The Schiebers responded with their own letter, explaining their opposition and pointing out another truth. If the police had properly investigated earlier sexual assaults, Shannon might never have been in danger at all. In May 2002, Graves received a life sentence in Colorado for 7 sexual assaults. In Philadelphia, he pleaded guilty to Shannon's murder and 6 rapes. Judge Benjamin Lerner sentenced him to life without parole plus 60, almost to 120 years. For the Schiebers, the sentence brought relief, not closure, because closure is a myth in cases like this, but the certainty that Graves would never harm another woman again. Shannon's case became a catalyst for change. Public outrage over the police department's mishandling of sexual assault reports led to the creation of an independent oversight committee. This body, made up of legal experts, victim advocates, and community representatives, reviewed how rape cases were classified and investigated. The results were sobering. Nearly 1 in 5 reports had been filed away as unfounded, often without adequate investigation. The committee's transparency and accountability model became a template for other cities, including New York and Ottawa. The Schiebers turned their grief into activism, advocating for both better policing and the repeal of the death penalty. Vicky traveled to more than 20 states sharing Shannon's story, and in 2011, she was named Abolitionist of the Year by the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Shannon Schieber's life was a testament to intelligence, compassion, and service. Her death was the result of a predator's violence compounded by systemic failure. From a storyteller's lens, this is a case where the crime isn't the only tragedy. The tragedy is also in the missed chances to stop it. From a human lens, it's a reminder that justice systems aren't just about catching criminals, but about valuing victims enough to take every report seriously. As Sylvester Schieber once said, "The hardest thing to accept is that our daughter did everything she could to call for help. Shannon was a good person who went out of her way to help almost anyone. The one time she needed help, the system didn't work." The reforms that followed won't bring Shannon back, but they may have saved lives since, and that, in the quietest way, is part of her legacy.